As a therapist, how do I bring research and science into the room with me and my therapy clients? Well, it's tricky because it isn't always black and white. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's amorphous. And while therapy and research should theoretically be linked, sometimes making that link isn't all that easy. So we're going to talk about that today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Anxious Truth. This is episode 343 of the podcast. We are recording in May of 2026 in case you are listening or watching from the future. I'm Drew Linsalata, creator and host of The Anxious Truth. I am a therapist that specializes in the treatment of anxiety and anxiety disorders, practicing in New York. I am a former sufferer of the very things we talk about on this podcast, an author, a advocate, psychoeducator, guy with expensive cameras and microphones, although neither the camera or the microphone that I'm using at the moment are terribly expensive. And here on The Anxious Truth, we talk about anxiety, anxiety disorders, and the process of anxiety recovery or desensitization, depending on the word that you like to use. People like me who practice in the area of anxiety disorders often talk about evidence-based practice or research-based practice. We're really big on that in my specialty, and we should be. But what really is the link between science and therapy, between research and therapy? How does a therapist bring research or science into the therapy room with a client? How do we use it? How do we leverage it? How do we try to use it to make your lives better? Well, I invited a friend along today for a discussion, Ana Lund. Ana is a practicing psychotherapist in the UK, and her area of expertise is the intersection between neuroscience and psychotherapy. So we chatted for about 45 minutes about this topic. I think it's kind of enlightening, gives you a rough idea of what people like Ana and I, or Josh Fletcher, my co-host on Disordered, or the other folks I collaborate with, will we go through to try to stay current in terms of research and new advances in the field, and how we have to interpret those things, filter them appropriately, and try to get them into the therapy room, if at all possible, in a useful and adaptive kind of way. Before we get into that discussion, just a quick reminder, there are way more resources than just this podcast episode or this YouTube video. If you head over to my website at theanxioustruth.com, everything is linked over there. And if you like The Anxious Truth, you'll really love the Disordered podcast that comes out every Friday. I co-host that with UK therapist Josh Fletcher. You can find that at disordered.fm, so check that out as well. And if you would like to talk about what you hear on The Anxious Truth, or interact with me or Josh or a bunch of your peers in a really supportive kind of place, it's not a cult. We're not promising anything. We're not gatekeeping. Just a little extra support and the ability to interact with us and maybe talk a little bit more about what you see here on these podcasts or YouTube episodes. You can check out the Disordered community space, which you'll also find at disordered.fm. So, without further ado, listen to me. Without further ado, let us get to the conversation with Ana. I think you're going to dig her. She's really cool. Let's do it. Okay, as promised, sitting next to me virtually across the ocean, another therapist from Manchester. I seem particular to you guys, Ana Lund. Hey, Ana, what's going on?
Hi. So glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, you definitely have a thing for Manchester therapists, yeah?
There's something about it. I don't know what it is. It just must be something in the air in Manchester.
The
Um,
deadpan. The
Yeah,
deadpan.
yeah, that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. So Anna and I met on Substack when I was writing on Substack. Anna's a bit of a kindred spirit. While we may practice, Anna's also a therapist, and I'll have to give you a little intro, but we share common interests in kind of being really annoyed and overly obsessed with nonsense and pseudoscience. So tell Anna, tell us the Reader's Digest version. Tell us about you.
I am a therapist in private practice in Manchester, and I work with clients. That's my day job. And over time, somehow, in the last 2 years or so, I started writing a little bit and thinking about things. And my interest was always, I don't know, after I finished my training, I started being curious about neuroscience and psychotherapy and kind of trying to understand what's what. And that is how I realized that there is a lot of nonsense in that field.
Mhm.
And by trying to really understand for myself what's what, I found that writing was a useful way for me to do that. As in, as I write, I kind of clarify what I think. And that's how it all started, as in, when it comes to any kind of working public engagement on talking or even meeting you. And other than that, I also give workshops or talks about neuroscience and psychotherapy. Lots of that is about attachment and neuroscience of attachment. And so one thing led to another, and it's only one of the things I write about.
Hmm.
the kind of neuroscience myths in psychotherapy. However, that ends up becoming my identity over time. And I think most of people know me for that. And I'm always, and sometimes even people criticize me saying, oh, it's always easy to criticize. But if you actually went on, my blogs that I've written over time,
Hmm.
actually, 90% of it will be very constructive, discussing specific ideas from neuroscience, how they can be applied in psychotherapy. However,
Right.
people always remember the ones that are ranting, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I hear you.
And so people perceive me as somebody who is ranting all the time. Yet, really, I assure you, that's really not my favorite activity. I would much rather like to discuss exciting new ideas.
Sure.
But unfortunately, the field is inundated when it comes to neuroscience with, what I call neurobollocks or neuroscience myths, or I don't know how you would call it, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I love when you did your neurobolics series. That killed me. I'm like, okay, clearly I have to be friends with this person, and it's true. I've had Beer to McDonald on. She's been on Disordered, and yeah, people love when I go off on a rant and I'm like, throwing punches at Bessel van der Kolk and all that stuff. But like, we're not going to do that today. We could do that, but we hear that all the time. What I prefer that we talk about, and it was really Anna's idea, so credit to you, is well, as working therapists, how do we actually apply the data, the neuroscience, the research in psychiatry and psychology? Like, how do we actually use it? How do we filter it? How do we consume it? And how is it useful to us? Because often there is a big
Or
there,
also,
or,
is it useful, right?
right, I was going to say, or even is it? How do we filter what we're going to bring into the practice and what we're not? There is a difference between theory and research and practice. There just is. So it's really a challenge for therapists to translate the data into minute by minute practice with your clients. So I thought it would be interesting to maybe talk a little bit about that. Like, where does that stuff show up? Now, I have a very particular specialization, which Anna doesn't necessarily share. But so I think it would be great to hear from somebody who isn't an anxiety disorder specialist. We're not talking about that today. It's just in general. So
Yeah.
yeah, how do you know? First of all, I guess we have an obligation. All working therapists have an obligation to stay current, right? We don't want to become dinosaurs. So how do you stay current on research? How's that? Let's start with that. What do you do?
Well, how I stay current? It's a really good question, but I don't think I do. And I will be, and I promise to you and to your audience here that I will be very candid. I am very candid, as in I
Mhm.
don't like to mystify things, and I don't stay current. Having said that, I would probably say that I stay current much more than many other therapists who claim to use neuroscience, because it's really, really difficult. And so, because neuroscience, of course, we say one word, but it's many, many sciences within neuroscience.
Mhm.
Even the somebody who is fully a full-time neuroscientist will only be able to kind of follow one specific branch of one field of neuroscience. And so, what I try to do is to kind of identify neuroscience figures, people, researchers who are working and prominent in the areas I'm interested in,
Mhm.
and then see what I guess flagship publications they have. And sometimes I will go into reading the specific papers, but I'm even more happy when they kind of make the effort to do the work of making it more accessible.
Sure.
And you had one of those people here, Lisa Feldman Barrett, right? So
Mhm.
she is somebody who, when it comes to neuroscience of emotion, has done a lot to translate her research into everyday language and what it means for everyday life.
Mhm.
Having said that, she's not a therapist, and she also hasn't worked with therapists as far as as far as I know. So
Yeah.
when she talks about specific actionable insight, kind of actions that we can do, it also falls short. So it's a very difficult question, and I don't think that question is actually solved at the moment. I think there's a big gap between kind of research and application.
Yeah.
But still, there is plenty of things that all of us can do to, I guess, up our knowledge, especially in the areas that we're interested. Now, if we kind of think of neuroscience, typically, in my view, what would be interesting in terms of neuroscience, aspects of neuroscience or different neurosciences that we want to know about is affective neuroscience, so neuroscience of emotion, um, all neuroscience related to trauma,
Mhm.
things like that. Of course, neuroscience related to anxiety. Anxiety is one area I find that can benefit from neuroscience. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, And of course, all this new exciting research that is coming out about the mind-body connection.
Mhm.
So at the moment, there's a thriving kind of amount of research coming out when it comes to the links between interoception, emotions, mental state, mental health, even gut health. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of one area where that you would expect to have lots of neurobologs, right? Gut health and mental health. But there is actually bona fide neuroscience coming out
Mm.
now that
Yeah.
there is a link. Having said that, the fact that there is a link doesn't mean that we know what to do with it.
Right. I think that's always the biggest thing. So if we're going to stay current, and it is, by the way, it's really hard to stay current because there's a lot of research being done all the time. And research tends to be very narrow. The best research is very narrow and focused, looking at one or two variables at the most. And then over time, that collection of research gives us general trends that maybe we could start to apply in the real world.
Absolutely.
So it's really
And
hard.
if I can just say
Yeah.
something, that's a good point. And so how would I stay current? My go-to would be to find a review, meaning so in if I was going to go to science papers,
Mhm.
what I would do is first thing, my first kind of go-to is does is there a popular book written by a neuroscientist, not written by somebody who thinks they understand neuroscience, but neuroscientists who are
Yep.
trying to kind of explain their research and how it's because usually if they write a book for general public, it's going to be a requirement from the publisher to make it also accessible in a way. Why should people know about this? So there's going to be some application or some ideas for application. So that's the first thing. Second thing I will look at, is there kind of a big review on this topic? So
Mhm.
a review or meta-analysis is people taking 20, 30, a number of studies relevant in specific field covering a specific question and looking into what is the trend amongst all this research. Can we find some common elements? Is there something that's definitely confirmed? Is there something that's still wonky? And I think a big thing that I see in use of neuroscience in psychotherapy is that somebody will find a study that seems to say something
Yeah.
and they go, okay, that's it. That means that this is this.
Yep.
And I can use a specific example. There is this example of a study that's been found that in mice, only one study that um, that there is a vagal branch of the vagus nerve slows down the heart, and that the dorsal branch of the vagus nerve is slowing down the heart, and that one study is then cited as the proof. Now, what that is missing is that there is a number of studies on this. First of all, it's in mice, so it's a model. It's a model organism that's not the same as us. That's the first thing. Second, there's dozens of studies, and that is the only one that has found that. And so nobody in science would consider that to be a fact.
Yeah.
That's why in science that's not considered to be a fact. It could be an artifact. It could be something that was with measurements, because all scientists make errors
Mhm.
and mistakes. All studies are in some ways flawed,
Mhm.
and it's only by adding kind of the body of knowledge and seeing whether that body of knowledge points to a certain direction or something that looks like certainty, you can
Mhm.
kind of infer whether something is then a fact that we can use in therapy. So I would always go to look at a review or a meta-analysis.
Yeah, I agree.
So that is I kind of go to, and I don't know if that's interesting for your readers, but there is some amazing meta-analysis for some of the important things that kind of we think about, let's say trauma or fear or amygdala, role of the amygdala in anxiety,
Sure.
and I can share it with you and your audience if that's relevant,
Yeah, if you
for
want to
people
send
to
over some
see
stuff.
more of an example what that means rather than necessarily read the paper. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it definitely does. And as working therapists, I think you nailed it. Like I can only really look at designing or like implementing interventions in the real world based on those reviews and those meta-analyses because I can't take one study. Even though I might be really excited about it, that's fine. I'm allowed to be personally or even professionally excited about it. We can't really, it's the review, it's the meta-analysis, it's the looking for trends, finding the emergence of patterns that seem to indicate that this might be true or at least reasonably true. right? There's a lot of consensus. Now we can start to forklift that into practical application. So yeah, I kind of tend to stay current the same way. I can tell you how I don't stay current. I don't listen to podcasts. I mean, yes, sometimes, but like it's really boring to read review papers and meta analyses. It's not. I mean, it's not that boring to me, but okay, and we're focused on particular areas. Anna likes to work in attachment. I'm clearly working in anxiety disorders. So I think what gets really confused in pop psychology and social media too is that, well, here's a therapist on a morning TV show, and this therapist talks about anything. Like that person is the go to when they ever have a mental health story, and they speak with authority about science on every mental health thing. But I don't know, therapists don't really do that. Like we all tend to practice in a given area. So I think that's the first step to me is what's your specialization, and then you're trying to stay reasonably current, trying to figure out how you can go from research to practice. This is challenging though, really challenging.
But it's very challenging, and I don't actually. So I myself would really be very uh so to say that y- one person goes from research into clinical practice and kind of find something themselves, it's a really long process, and I would be myself would not make such claims. It's really complicated, and doesn't happen very often so far. Now, I think really an interesting question is, even prior to your question, is the question of, is it even useful, And I know that people are sometimes a bit surprised that I asked that question because I'm specialized in that.
Mhm,
So, but I feel that it's really good that I'm asking myself those questions. Is it even worth it? Because in that way, I kind of go against my confirmation bias, right?
mhm.
If I question the very foundation of what I do, that's how I'm sure that, I am critical of myself rather than just kind of following whatever I'm invested in. And I think it's a big question. Actually, there is many people who will say that neuroscience was a letdown for psychotherapy. Actually, neuroscience was a letdown for so neuroscience is overall criticized for not providing lots of real life improvement.
Mhm.
It's a very theoretical discipline. Some of them work on such a specific like micro processes, understanding the fundamentals of how the channels work, or understanding a very kind of basic mechanisms that the translation in kind of real life are neuroscience is criticized for that, independently from psychotherapy.
Yeah, I
And so
agree.
that is true also for psychotherapy. And there is a question to be asked, is there anything that's kind of valuable that has come to psychotherapy from neuroscience, other than the biohacks or the neuroscience language that makes you sound really savvy and intelligent and knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And I think I think there are some things, but I think some people could argue against, and they wouldn't be completely wrong.
I
So
would kinda
so
I would argue against that. I think that neuroscience hasn't been terribly useful to us. And you're right, and it's that reason, and I'll often use like a visualization and say, "Well, we know how the sun works, but that doesn't mean we know how to work the sun." And like in neuroscience, largely like you said, we're looking for descriptive models. Can we look at how things work and come up with a model that seems to reasonably like predict what we see? Yeah, that would fit, but just because you know how it works doesn't mean it's workable. There's no manual, no knobs and levers on half of these things. So is it useful? Honestly, I'm a huge fan of the work of, say, Lisa Feldman. I had her on the podcast. I'm a huge fan. Is it is it applicable? How do we use it? Like, we have this emerging model that's starting to really look like, yeah, this does seem to be kind of how emotions are constructed and subjective experience is built. That was, it comes out of neuroscience, it comes out of computational psychiatry. There's a lot of cool stuff that builds this over a long period of time. But still, how do you use it? I
I mean,
can't hard to bring
if
that
I
in.
think of that specific theory, right?
Yeah,
And having said that, the theory of constructed emotions is a controversial still theory. It's a
it is.
theory. It's a real theory. There is a body of work, so it's not like some fringe theory. But
Sure.
still, there is many very serious neuroscientists who don't wholesale agree, right?
Hmm.
And so it's not the theory. It's a theory as far as I'm concerned. But
Yeah.
I actually feel that I have drawn some conclusions out of that body of work that have informed my work in therapy. Having said that, when I listened to, I didn't, of course, listen to all the podcasts and appearances on TV or media of Lisa Fairmont Barrett, but I did listen to some where she was asked specifically to give an advice, and she said something that I think any therapist would find laughable. She said, "Well, sometimes the best thing you can do is just to sit. Maybe you need a glass of water.
I
Maybe
knew
you
you were
just
going to
need to."
say
So she said, actually, just sit down, don't feel sorry for yourself. And maybe she didn't say that, but something along
right.
the
Right.
lines, maybe what all you need is your brain needs a bit of respite, a little bit of rest.
Yeah.
Because brain, in the end of the day, it's an organ that functions on finite resources, and sometimes it needs a break. But I mean, just think all that work and theory and investment in that kind of science, and then what we have as a result is like,
You got to have a
get a
glass of
glass of
water.
water. I mean, as a therapist, you wouldn't be really, you wouldn't become much more, let's say, knowledgeable or skilled
Sure.
with that addition to your skill set.
But I think it's a good illustration because here we even have a prominent researcher and she's legit, even though you're right, it's an emerging theory. It's not the theory. Even on this podcast, she did say that. Like if I'm, because
Oh,
she
did she say
understands,
so?
she
Yeah,
did.
because I started listening and I didn't finish, so I didn't get
And
it
that's
from
fine.
that podcast. She said it
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Yeah. She does it all the
But
time.
so she.
But that's okay because in that theory that she's a proponent of and she's kind of driving, like the emotion is just part of what we experience when our brain is trying to
Mm.
balance our body budget. And that's fine. I can appreciate that. Right. Except the practical application of that is, well, I noticed that if I'm feeling really anxious, it might mean I just need a glass of water. Like, it's like, ooh, I
Imagine
get
you,
that.
you have a client and they go on action. You go, there
Yeah.
you go. I'm gonna get you a
There you
glass
go.
of
No
water.
problem. I got you. It's all cured. So it's really challenging to bring the theory into practice. What I find is most useful, and if I look at those theories, I use constructed emotions. I use predictive processing model. I use those theories, but they're really good as conceptual frameworks. Now, I know that anybody who's listening that is a big polyvagal fan is going to say, "Oh, that's what we say about polyvagal theory, and you are all over us." Yeah, I know, but this one kind of has support. So that's the difference.
Yeah, well,
But
it's
yeah, this
different,
one
right?
actually isn't just made up. So sorry, I had to go there at least once. But I find that I can use those theories in psychoeducational phase or to help people form their own conceptualization of like what this problem might be and why they're not doomed or broken and it's handleable. This is a natural process. It creates really difficult circumstances for you inside yourself. But there's reasonable explanation for why that's happening. It's not going to break you, and we can learn to handle that. It doesn't fix it. There's no hack. Drink a glass of water with this poured in it, or count to this, do this thing, breathe a special way. There is no such thing that comes out of research, and interventional research too in psychotherapy, takes a really long time. Before you have an intervention or a modality that could say, like, hey, we've been empirically validated, that it's years and years and years from theory to intervention to validation of
Destinies,
medication.
right? Destinies.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, it takes a really long time. So, like, you gotta be careful about that too. So, I
But
mean,
I
there's
just,
some
so
framework.
if we kind of think of practical things, let me just kind of make it more specific, as in I even feel this is not a dig at Lisa Feldman Barrett. I mean,
Mm,
she's amazing.
no,
That's just
I
not her
get it.
job. Her job is to kind of ask these fundamental questions about human mind, right? That's what
Mhm,
she's working on. And I feel that a therapist or somebody who is kind of there working in the both fields could actually find much more in her theory that would be very applicable. I think
mhm,
there's more than what she says, because she obviously her focus is on something else. But I know that what changed for me when it comes to knowing about the theory, and while there is things in this theory maybe that not everybody agrees on, I think when it comes to the fact that emotions are constructed rather
mhm.
than completely innate, I think everybody serious agrees on that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
the
helpful.
level of, I think Lisa thinks that it's none of it is innate, even the circuits, even the kind of the basic architecture. I think some others will think, well, there is a basic hardware there, then that's after molded with the culture and experiences. So I think there's a difference there, but everybody agrees that emotions are not just innate as we kind of experience them. And so with that, However, in psychotherapy training, I don't know how it was for you. We always learned that this was a fact, and this was kind of, this was 101 of our training, was that there is five basic emotions,
Yeah.
and that we were always to when we have a client who comes confused what they feel, saying this, saying that, we were little by little to guide them to identify which one of these five core emotions they were feeling.
Mm,
And then we would have this specific way to work with anger, specific way to work with grief and sadness, specific way to work with fear. And so that's really, at odds
yeah.
with, I think, how emotions are thought about today in neuroscience. And therefore, I don't do that anymore. So
Yeah.
was a practical change in how I work with emotions. As in, I don't force any more people. I mean, I was not forcing them like, come on, what emotions do you feel? Come on.
And
But
everyone's a tough room.
I don't try to kind of push them in a specific box, or give them that specific label. I explore what I understand and how I understand it. Every emotion is unique in a way, and as such we try to find their description in their specific context, cultural, personal, their sensibility, how they are. And so this is a big change for me. But I think some therapists, or maybe many, still work on the basis that there is five basic emotions and
Yeah.
that they are hardwired in the brain.
Yeah. But
And
that,
and
which
I
is,
think, as a result of work of Lisa Feldman Barrett, I think nobody serious thinks that anymore,
yeah.
so kind of rigidly,
Well, I think, there's that drive, and all humans have it. It's just part of who we are. We want to make it very simple. We want to boil it down to a very basic framework that we can use. But we're driven for that, and that's all right. But that's in the work that I do in my specialty, that's actually a really harmful framework. There are five basic emotions you learn. Here's the wheel. If I walk in and see there's a therapist as the emotion wheel, I'm like, oh no, we gotta have a problem. It tells people, so here's a practical application of theory. And then what you're describing is a shift in that theory. And I'm with you on that. When you tell somebody your first step is to just define the emotion. Now, I will often teach people affect labeling, but the affect labeling is now very fuzzy.
It's
Like,
of
what are you
course.
experiencing right now? And I'll always say when I see them do that whole like the brow furrows, it's like, well, you might not be able to put a word to this, and that's okay. We're just trying to describe what's happening instead of making a prediction of catastrophe for somebody panicking, for instance. So but it's
So
okay to let them
again,
off the hook, and, like, you don't have to say, "I'm this," because if they can't define it with a word that matches the wheel and the facial expression, it increases that agitation, and they feel like their brain is betraying them, and it's broken, and something is wrong, and my anger circuit is dysregulated, but that's not true because it's so fuzzy and
and
amorphous.
and I think affect labeling
Yeah.
might, I think, to a naive eye seem, I use affect labeling, and
Yeah.
it might seem that I'm contradicting myself to a naive, or you're. But no,
I
that's very different, because you're not saying to the person, choose one and you can't feel both. You are giving to me, some people, just their level of emotional kind of literacy, and their level of reflective functioning is not that developed, and giving them really words, more subtle ways to describe what they feel, it just allows them to express them. It doesn't put it in one or another box. I never say, oh, you can only choose one and it has to be 100% that one. It's not like that, but you're giving them vocabulary, really, right?
Yeah. And I think you're also breaking them out of like a decision tree. So, like, if you're in a state of distress and I say, what emotion is it? Pick from the wheel. There's five choices. Pick one. And, okay. Well, if you pick this one, that's like an if then. And then we go down this. Now we do this intervention for that. But it doesn't work that way. So usually what I'm trying to do with that sort of thing, and using now the new, the research that comes out of places like Lisa Feldman Barrett's lab is, well, let's, instead of saying I feel like, I use affect labeling and anxiety disorders to get people out of the whole it feels like. No, no, don't tell me what it feels like, because the part where it feels like is the thing that's driving your compulsion and your avoidance. So just tell me what it feels. Well, I don't know what it feels. All right, what's going on in your body? Oh, I feel my chest is really tight. It feels like somebody has their hand in my throat. I'm having a hard time swallowing, or my breath is very shallow right now. Okay, That's accurate. That's part of affect labeling. Can you is there an
Mm.
emotion there? I don't know, I just feel off. I don't know, uncomfortable, afraid. All right, cool. No problem. With that, we can work with that. But there's not a definite, okay, well, now that you said that, I picked on this menu of hacks that I use. It doesn't work that way. We're just trying to preempt the jump to the prediction of like, oh, and this means I'm going to have a stroke. No, no, no. You've been wrong about that for 25 years. So let's just look at that process working out. So that might be one
But
way, right?
the affect labeling is another thing that I'm not sure the history of affect labeling. Did affect labeling come before neuroscience into psychotherapy? Possibly, yes. I'm not sure here, but I know that neuroscience has validated that.
Mhm,
So we know it's not just a thing that we do in therapy, but we actually have no clue whether it's effective. We know that affect labeling does regulate affect and emotion. So affect labeling is an effective strategy.
oh, yeah.
And I guess that kind of brings me to that can neuroscience can work on or be useful on several levels, right? The biggest one is psychoeducation. Would you agree?
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And so sometimes that's a really good thing, but sometimes I think it's maybe overplayed a little bit. Its importance. Some people also say, because I asked that question on my Substack, and some people said, well, it is psychoeducation, but that is really underselling it because for some people, understanding that there is a process that
Mhm,
creates something rather than something rotten in them or there's some kind of like there is like something bad in them.
mhm,
It is more than just psychoeducation. But the and then there is the level where I guess neuroscience can validate something,
mhm.
right? That
Sure.
EMDR, for example, at
Mhm,
the moment, I think neuroscience is going to the direction of validating the EMDR. Yet EMDR has, I mean, how it kind of happened, it's kind of some mysterious ways,
right.
how.
You still
But
learning.
there is emerging evidence to actually validate it, so it can validate.
Mhm.
Or the best thing, but I think it was the rarest so far, is to bring the new stuff, innovation,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of the rarest, I think.
Yeah, psychoeducation, I agree. It is that is where it's used most. I think when you're working now, psychoeducation, when you're writing on Substack or I'm posting on social media, that's all we're really doing in the end. But if you're working with a therapy client, we're going to start with psychoeducation. Here's what we know about this. Here's what I think I know about this.
Mm,
Here's the state of the research that we think we know. But then that person can take that, and I have to form a conceptualization of what's going on with this client, but they need to form their own conceptualization of their own problem as well. So it can be really helpful for a therapy client to get some of that data and use and synthesize it with their experience. And so they form a conceptualization of, okay, well, this is what I think is going on with me, and this is what we're going to work on. So, yeah, I mean, that's where does research and neuroscience show up? I think in part of that, if people understand that, like, if all they know is they come into therapy and they say, I have an anger management problem. Or I have an anger problem. Like, okay, well, how do you know that? Well, because this, and this, or I saw it on TikTok, or like, well, my mother said I have an anger management problem. All right, well, do you? We might talk about psychoeducation of anger and emotions and how emotions are built and all the different things that go into that. And not everything is even anger. We don't even know. Some anger is normal. And that person might form a conceptualization that says, yeah, sometimes I get really angry and I don't necessarily know how to deal with that. But it's not just me having to modulate my own emotion unilaterally. There's
mm,
contextual things that go play into this, and I may have to operate on the context as well. And then the research that we bring into that helps that person, I think, get a more holistic view of what their issue is and what can be worked on. Otherwise, you're right. They just see it as I have a broken switch and we need to like replace that switch, please.
mm.
Yeah, or get it unstuck.
As
Like
you speak about that, I'm thinking, something came to mind where I think, yeah, there is the psychoeducation can be more than it's not just you telling the
that.
client how it is. And I rarely talk to the clients about research, also because I'm not I can't be like doing the research review to the client. First of all, because I don't know it myself,
Yeah,
to be fair,
yeah.
and also because it wouldn't be appropriate, I feel. But there was now, as you were talking, what came to my mind, I had a client where a client was feeling, in language, kind of, we use word love, right?
Mhm,
Love is one, we are describing love. It can be love for your partner, it can be love for your child, it can be love for the friend, it can be a feeling of love in a specific moment, right? Because your love, your heart is full of joy. And we have this, as a culture, at least where I live, there's this kind of thing, well, you can only love one person, really, or one love has to be over the other one. And so this specific client was feeling that they obviously he loved his children, but he felt that there was some moment in his life where he felt this he was in a concert somewhere, and he has taken some drugs, and he felt so good, overwhelmed by love, and he felt amazing until he started thinking, oh, I'm a bad parent, because
Because I don't
how
feel
can I
this.
feel this love for all this, whoever he was with there, with friends or
Sure.
these other random people around me, while I have my children waiting at home. And at this moment I feel this peak experience of love that I'm not sure I felt with them. And he was really haunted by that experience, and it took him a while to reveal that in therapy, that was the reason,
Yeah.
because he felt really ashamed. But and I did use neuroscience kind of informed way to work with that, saying that we use the word love for experiences that ultimately are not the same thing at all.
Yeah.
And what he experienced there and then was a chemical reaction in
Mhm.
his body that had nothing to do with his children. They're not even the same circuits in the brain, right? There might be some overlaps at some points, but the
Yeah.
feelings we have for children, it's something we call it love. And we kind of, that love encompasses everything else, but it's so much more. So,
Ultimately,
so words fail us there, really, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah. Or if you're bringing the neuroscience of, say, constructed emotions into that, or even subjective experiences, like, well, the issue is the label love is inherently limited by your socialization, our culture, our language. So we need a better word for that. Like,
And
then,
there's also this kind of all these social values and moral values. You can only love one person. I mean, I know things are extending, and luckily so in the world. But where I live, it's
no,
mainly
I
you
get it.
love one person, and
Right.
if you like another person, you might be a bad person. And there's lots of kind of shame and judgment around that, and a real understanding that ultimately it's how the body works, and doesn't mean that if we have certain feelings for this one person that
Mm,
cancels everything else. It's not how it works.
yeah.
And understand that there was like that moment of light bulb moment for the client.
Yeah. Wait a
Problem
minute.
resolved.
Right. Not maybe I'm not doing anything wrong, or nothing's wrong
And
with
he
me.
was like, well, no, it's actually it's the one word, and I was judging myself for having to have this hierarchy of loves, and my children have to be on the top. But what if it's two completely different kind of
Yeah.
things?
Sure.
You can't compare them. And so that was really helpful in that sense. I think there is sometimes an insight that comes from maybe offering a perspective that comes from neuroscience without going into the nitty-gritty of the papers,
Sure.
that can be really enlightening for the client, and sometimes resolve the problem, really.
Yeah, and in that situation, there wasn't even really an intervention, a task, a thing, a hack. It was just explaining, hey, this is one way to look. This is a different way to look at what you call love, and is why it's different from one circumstance to another, and how experience. And wow, like that's all that sometimes that person needed to hear. I often will tell people, you don't get to pick what emotion you have. Like, you just don't get to pick, like, go ahead, be happy. Like, I demand you to be happy, and we laugh and blah, blah, blah. And all that stuff can really let people off the hook. Now, that's not an intervention. That's just like, hey, can you consider the possibility that you do not get to decide to not have an emotion, nor can you instantly conjure the emotion you think you're supposed to have? And just hearing that, it's like, oh, okay. So I'm just like everybody else. You mean like my emotions wax and wane and come and go? Sure. And that really comes out of research that's, I mean, maybe before we started even using the word neuroscience, in things like thought suppression and things of that nature. Like, we've looked at that stuff for a very long time. So like, hey, yeah, we pretty much know in labs that, like, you can't make people feel happy no matter what you do. Like, you could try to trigger it, but like, you cannot have somebody just say, well, when you look at your daughter, make sure you feel level nine. Is it level nine love? Oh no, it's not level nine love. You're terrible. Didn't you see all the mom posts on social media? Like, it's, so we can use research to help people understand
That's
maybe
so
a little bit more
interesting, actually. You're
accurately.
right. I didn't actually use that as kind of a thought process, and for me in work, I don't think so. To kind of, yeah, you can't conjure up
You can't.
love.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, or a feeling
And
that you
you
want. You,
can't
you can't
conjure
just
feelings.
make it appear. You can make appear a thought. Thoughts
That you
are
well,
different.
that's right.
You
Or you
can you
can
can
conjure a
say to
memory.
yourself, yeah, but
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that can maybe induce a feeling.
right. but that's not the same as I'm sitting with my friend Anna, and why can't I just can't feel deep affection for my friend? I don't know, like, well, maybe I can remember when we were joking about eggnog and we laughed and, oh, yeah, then I would feel it, but why can't I feel it when I'm in the room with her? And so in my work, I get a lot of that. People are those metacognition.
Because they kind of want to feel certain feelings, right?
They're so invested in like, what do my feelings or lack of feelings mean? Are they right? Are they wrong? How do I get rid of this feeling? How do I make this feeling like? And so that really drives them into a frenzy. Like, just understanding that, like, we really do have a whole lot of data that says, I don't know how to make you feel better right now. We don't have that, but I can tell you that you don't have to try to suppress this emotion and make that emotion. You don't have to do that. So that's a really simple. That's not really it's just a little bit of psychoeducation that they can synthesize with their own experience, and like, their experience tends to
But
improve.
ultimately, that kind of psychoeducation becomes a little bit more, right?
Yes, it is
Because it
more. It's
becomes
not
a
just
tool for oneself. It becomes a tool to kind of um, talk to yourself and kind of change how your relationship to your thoughts or feelings, right?
that's
So it
exactly
becomes a
right.
little bit more. So that's kind of where it edges towards useful tools sometimes, the psychoeducation. And I'm thinking like also all the stuff around mindfulness. I know you use mindfulness for, right, for anxiety work, and all that stuff, while that's not neuroscience per se, it did come into psychotherapy because of neuroscience researching it and finding it actually effective. Do you see what I mean? Because
Sure.
the probably I don't know if you would be using mindfulness if there was no work like of like people like John Kabat-Zinn or people who actually brought find mindfulness to the kind of
Yeah.
research lab.
What would you
And
use
I
then?
certainly wouldn't.
Honestly, on it, I think in the West, we probably wouldn't be using it much at all, because we kind of owe that to the people who sort of secularized those Eastern practices and brought it into our sphere. You're probably right. We wouldn't be thinking about it, but a whole half of the world would be like, um, "Hello, we've been doing this for like 2,000 years. Talk to us about it." You don't need somebody with a functional MRI machine to understand that this tends to improve people's subjective quality of life. But we might not have seen it here in the West. You might be right. You're right. So.
It's so that is true, and I think yeah, there wouldn't be that wide application in kind of therapy approaches that are evidence based.
Yeah.
Like there is the MBCT, mindfulness based cognitive therapy. I mean that was developed in UK, so I know a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And they only so they kind of went to John Kabat-Zinn saying, okay, there's always this there's always this relapse of people who had treatment for depression and they go back to depression, and what can we maybe this can work. And they only went to John Kabat-Zinn because there was already research on effectiveness of mindfulness. They
Yeah.
wouldn't be going to some kind of guru in India for that,
Sure.
because they wanted something that had evidence base, right?
Right. We need something
And
like.
also, I mean, I think if somebody who is into these Eastern and contemplative practices, they might hate me now for what they say, but I feel also sometimes neuroscience can almost separate the good stuff from unnecessary stuff in these practices.
Yep.
Recently, what comes to mind, I was reading about breath work and the slow breath work practices, and turns out that pace is really important. Slower, the better kind of thing,
Mhm.
more or less. This is an
Yeah, sure.
oversimplification, but all these kind of added bells and whistles, do you do 5 here and then you stop? Doesn't really matter, doesn't change.
Yeah.
But yet when you kind of look breathwork practitioners, there's all sorts of kind of bells and whistles and frills, and do this and then you do this, but ultimately most it looks like what the most important thing is how much you slow down,
Yeah. That's
and
you're
whatever gets you there.
right. Exactly. And so
And
that's
so
where
in a
we.
way it kind of cuts through that noise
Yep.
of all the things and finds what is really effective, what is kind of the secret ingredient, I suppose. So I think
Well,
that can be, you know
that's how I would when I'm using mindfulness. And I was found an interesting anecdote. We had was he on this pod? No, he was on Disordered. So Stephen Hayes, who the originator of ACT, right? So he was on
ah
Disordered, right? And he made was really interesting comment. He's like, well, there's no formal mind. It's a mindfulness component in ACT, of course, but there is no formal mindfulness practice in ACT as it is tends to be practiced. And his fear was, I didn't want it to sort of look like a cult. So it wasn't even like, well, there's no evidence behind it. Yeah, there sure is, except the perception. So that's an interesting intersection of like research, which yeah, there's a lot of data that validates the usefulness of mindfulness practices, and still, but it looks a little woo, and he didn't want it to look too woo, so they didn't write any formal mindfulness into act. So interesting, right? But we use like that neuroscience research cuts through the crap when we teach mindfulness in the context of anxiety disorders, because we take away all the parts where people demand an outcome to it. This is calming and grounding. It quiets your mind. No, it doesn't. We have nothing about that. Like, well, let me strip it down to like Anna just said about breathing. Go slow. That's it. That's what the data tells us. Go slow. However way you get there, you get there. It's all good. There's no secret sauce. There's no magic hack there. But
And I
people,
guess
they bolt on all kinds of stuff to mindfulness that doesn't
can
belong
we
there.
be a little bit cynical here? Can we just do us?
Go for it. Yeah, that's just
Can
be
we just
us.
to be us? This is real us now.
Yeah,
No, I'm joking. But the sometimes I feel as a cynic in me maybe feels that sometimes a certain mindfulness practitioner or breathwork practitioner or a teacher needs to kind of add something that is their hallmark, their
correct.
signature,
Right.
and to claim that that's better than somebody else, and therefore they'll be saying, "Oh, I have this special way." To do it or this special way, because in the end of the day, also when you think of mindfulness, there is ultimately five or four practices of mindfulness.
Yeah.
There's compassion, there's attention training, there is like the what there's attention training, compassion, and perspective taking. These are three kind of
Yep.
directions, the three kind of branches of mindfulness. Each one of them, the practices are just variation one of the other.
Right.
Yet there is so many kind of these mindfulness teachers and gurus who provide something really, really specific, and then all everybody talks about it, and that becomes a thing. But ultimately, I also think you can strip it down to very few practices.
Yeah. Well, there's
Uh,
nothing. I'm sorry, Anna, I stepped on you. I mean,
no, it's okay. You can please
we are being
do
cynical. You're
you.
right. It's okay. But I will always say, if I can't proceduralize it by bolting on my own special sauce, then I have nothing to sell. Like if I just tell somebody like you literally don't need anything to be mindful. You can be mindful any place, anytime you practice. There's no equipment. You don't need a book. You don't need a coach. You don't need any of that stuff. Like there's very basic principles. Once you learn those, you can practice them on your own. There's nothing to sell. I don't have anything to sell then. And unfortunately, at least in the West, we always need something to sell. It's like we do understand the value of water. We need it, right? But like then somebody decided, well, you not just need water, you need special kind of water. You need
Smart
water,
water.
right? You need alkaline water. Like what? You need this from this spring. Like otherwise, there's nothing to sell. It's just water. So the same thing happens in psychotherapy, I think.
But that's only you are so cynical only because you don't understand the memory of the cells.
Oh my god. Do not get me started on that. The memory of
and
molecules.
and the mitochondria.
Yeah. Oh
Please
my god.
educate yourself.
This water is directly descended from water that once was in the same room as smallpox, and so they will protect you. Oh god. Anyway, thank you, Anna. This was so much fun. We're at like 50 minutes, so people will start to drop off, and I don't blame them. But I hopefully what we're able to do here is give you some idea of, if nothing else, take this away from it, which is I don't think an ethical therapist. Now, we can all get excited about specific research. We said that right from the beginning, and I'm sure we both do. But be very mindful of the whole like, my therapist told me that one, and it's one very specific task or procedure or hack or like a diagnosis that comes because of how you keep your legs when you sleep. So, neuroscience says that means you are autistic. Like, come on, man, like we don't do that. We really don't do that. So it's important to recognize it's a complicated process of us bringing research into practice, and it's going to vary from day to day. It's going to be very individual for the person, I think, and what we're working on. So I don't know. What would you wrap put the bow on this? What would you put a bow
So
on?
I would like to say one thing is that I really, if it's for the people who are therapists and practitioners who listen to this, but also if you're just somebody who is interested in how the inner work is of the mind,
Yeah,
it's it's not, this is not gatekeeping as saying, oh, don't look in. No, be curious,
yeah,
but then try to learn about it. Try to learn about it not from Instagram posts, There is a reason why scientific papers are not written on, what is the limit on Instagram?
Oh God,
300 words.
yeah, not nearly enough.
Yeah. And so there is so if we want to learn something, well, we just have to put in the time. So if
Yeah.
you're interested, by all means, explore, have crazy ideas, but put some time in, learn the basics of the brain. Learn the basic, what is the synapse, just the basics elements of the brain, because otherwise we can't be thinking of, oh, I'm using neuroscience without just knowing the basics. Imagine somebody who is a physio without knowing the bones. I mean, doesn't make any sense. So that's one thing. And second thing, I would say that, yeah, for the moment, I think maybe neuroscience under delivered in some ways. I do think, however, that we are going to see some very exciting stuff coming in next years, as in how to change behaviors and habits and things like that. There's lots of very exciting research going on at the moment, and I'm really hopeful that some of that will kind of trickle down
Mhm.
into what we can use in therapy. So neuroscience is a young science, and therefore, let's give them some slack. But that ends now, so some results now, please.
Please. We've been waiting. Hello, we're waiting. I'm with you on that. I will set up the
Yeah.
sequel when you come back and we do this again, because we will have to do it again. There's so much we could talk about this. Neuroscience has underdelivered. I agree with you, except it has been overused. I don't know how that's possible for both of those
I
things
mean,
to be
I
true.
think I
But
think
it
this
has
is
underdelivered, but it's over applied. How I don't know how that can
okay.
continue.
This is I think the line that is, if you boil down everything of this in our conversation, I think this is perfect tagline.
Yeah, there you go.
Neuroscience has underdelivered but has been overused. So this is the perfect way to get angry and get, enemies both in neuroscience community and in people who use neuroscience in psychotherapy.
All right, I'm gonna
Good
love this.
job.
I'll use that tag. It's to rage bait people into watching this.
Please, please do, please do. I will, when you publish this on your YouTube channel and you on your podcast, I
Yeah,
will use that tagline to actually introduce it. Neuroscience has under-delivered and has been overused.
overused, absolutely. So very good. Thank you, Anna. I
And
appreciate it.
thank you so much for having me. Thank you for
Oh,
this opportunity.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming. I will come back as you just do a quick wrap up. I'll give you all of Anna's links and stuff so you could find her in the show notes on the podcast or on my website or on YouTube. Anyway, we'll be back in a minute to wrap it up. Thank you.
And thank you everybody for listening. Bye bye.
Okay, we are back. I enjoyed that conversation. Anna's great. Anna and I have become friends. I trust her. She knows what she's talking about. And I love her specific area of interest where we tie neuroscience and psychotherapy together in a practical kind of way. And as you can see from the discussion, it ain't always easy. So if you would like to know more about Anna, where to find her, her Substack, her website, the stuff that she's involved with, I would highly urge you to follow along with her. She doesn't have a big social media presence, but when she does write, it's all good stuff. And it's really useful and I think pretty enlightening. So I will put all of her links in the podcast show description if you're listening, in the YouTube description if you're watching as a video, or on my website. If you're checking this out on my website, I will put all her links there. So check that out. Yeah, what else can I tell you? I think that's about it. Follow along with Anna. Hopefully it gives you a little better idea of what we mean when we say evidence-based practice, or when you're on the internet and you hear people make silly "my therapist told me," or "according to my therapist," or "according to neuroscience." Hopefully we maybe gave you a little bit of better perspective as to how to interpret that sort of stuff. If you enjoy this podcast episode and you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you can leave a 5-star rating, well, go ahead if you think The Anxious Truth deserves it. Of course, if you really like the podcast, maybe write a review because it lets other people find it. More people get help. That's why I do this to begin with. And of course, if you're watching or listening on YouTube, maybe consider hit the subscribe button. At a minimum, like the video. It's just a couple of clicks for you, but it really helps me. It tells YouTube that you like when I make this content, so they don't just automatically bury me, which is kind of tough when you put this time into it and the video goes nowhere. Anyway, either way, if you just watched along and stayed to this point, thank you. That's support enough for me. I appreciate you all. I'll be back again in 2 weeks with another episode of The Anxious Truth. Again, check out Disordered. That comes out every Friday. Check that out at disordered.fm. Check out the other website resources on my website at theanxioustruth.com. And yeah, I'll be back in 2 weeks. Not sure what we're talking about, but I'll be back. See you then.